Good morning, members. It's now 10:30. Welcome to the Sutherland Area Committee. This is our first committee meeting since since the COVID shutdown. So welcome to everybody, and it's nice to get back to some kind of normality, even if it is an unusual normality. So but anyway, we're all here. We're waiting for one person to arrive, Councillor Linda Monroe, but perhaps he's sent apologies. So going through the agenda, first of all, apologies for absence, and do we have any apologies at all?
I haven't received any apologies.
Okay, well, we'll assume that Councillor Monroe will join us as the meeting progresses. Item number 2 on the meeting is declarations of interest. Does anybody want to declare any declarations of interest for any part of the agenda?
Chair, item 5, I've already informed Anne of that I'm declaring interest, non-financial interest for item 5 as a director of DACIC.
That's fine, Jim. Thank you for that. I'm not quite sure. Are you on the right agenda item? Because that's the COVID response item. So you're on.
Indeed, I was looking at the papers and not the actual agenda. It's 7 part 2.
7 part 2. That's fine. Thank you, Jim. That's good. Any other declarations of interest from anybody else? Deirdre.
Not a declaration of interest, Chair, but just to say Linda has emailed to say she's having to restart her computer and she'll join us as soon as she can.
That's fine. Thanks for the update there. Okay, and do we have any other declarations of interest that you're aware of?
No, I haven't received any more.
Okay, that's fine. Before we start the next part of the agenda, I just want to make all members aware of a change to Standing Order number 12. That's the notices of motion. You should also get written confirmation of this, but the changes are relating to notices of motion for committee meetings, and in particular for area committee meetings. So from now on, we can lodge motions 14 days in advance of a committee meeting, and it needs to be proposed and a seconder, and we can have up to 5 motions for any area committee meeting. So for future reference, should any member wish to lodge a motion for an area committee meeting, then you need to do that within 14 days of the prior to 14 days of the committee meeting starting. So if you could bear that in mind, that'd be very useful, because I think that we can actually do quite a lot with that. I think it gives us lots of opportunities, and I welcome that change in standing orders. Okay, moving on, we have Jason Gardner from Scottish Fire and Rescue Service with us today. So welcome, Jason. Jason is going to give us the latest update on what's been happening in the Highland and more specifically the Sutherland area. So over to you, Jason.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody. At the moment, I've got the figures for Q4 for 2019-2020. I've forwarded a copy of the report through Anne. Hopefully you've all got a copy in front of you, but a brief summary. Accidental fires for Q4 are pleasing with a nil return. Whilst these figures do not include the entire lockdown during the COVID period, they do reflect a significant amount of work that's been carried out by our community safety teams across Sutherland, and the support that's been given particularly to the most vulnerable and the high risk households. The strong links continue to be developed between ourselves and partner agencies to signpost those most at risk, and whilst close working relationships with colleagues in the health and social care sector and Police Scotland and NHS Highland are showing very positive outcomes and very good use of the VPL and the AP1 forms that Police Scotland and we share between each other. Again, moving on to fatal casualties, again, really pleasing to see another 0 return, with the last fatality recorded in March 2017. Again, highlighting the work that the community safety teams are doing across the region, with advocates from Caithness and Inverness particularly supporting us in Sutherland. As many of you are aware, the community safety advocate Andrew Mackay that worked with us across Sutherland was promoted in January to Watch Commander Rural Support, and Andrew is continuing to support the highest risk households and those most urgently in need. The organisation has suspended routine home safety visits during COVID, really in response to the COVID lockdown, but we are continuing to provide the highest and most vulnerable households with visits and support where needed. Non-fatal casualties, again, another zero return for us, and again, that's a really positive figure and is testament to the hard work that's carried out by the community safety teams across Sutherland on a day-to-day basis. Deliberate fires, we've had 2 in Q4, and they're the first since Q1. So we're continuing to work closely with police officers from Police Scotland, and very positive action following a deliberate fire at Royal Dornoch Golf Club. Police Scotland have identified, arrested and charged an individual with suspicion of deliberate fire setting at that. And we're working really hard to be robust in terms of a response with ourselves and partner agencies to any suspected deliberate fire setting. Whilst outside the reporting figures, the number of wildfires is slightly down this year on last year, although the reasons for a number of the wildfires are as a result of people burning garden waste in their own property and that fire spreading out with. We've provided a lot of advice and support to communities, and we've worked with Scottish Government in terms of muir burning advice, and that's had a really positive effect. Special service road traffic collisions, we've had 4 in Q4, 2 in January and 2 in February, neither of which were particularly serious and didn't lead to any life-changing injuries. And we've seen a significant decrease in road traffic collisions in this quarter and going into the first quarter of 2020, simply due to lockdown and the reduction of vehicles on the road. We've not attended a single road traffic collision, touch wood, since February. So operationally on that front, it's really good. We've really put a lot of time and effort into working with schools pre-lockdown, and we've introduced technology. I think a lot of you have seen the virtual reality goggles that we've introduced into schools, and we've had really positive feedback that it's an interactive and engaging process for them now. And the community safety advocates, and again with Andrew Mackay's support, we will look at, as soon as we can safely reintegrate with schools, once they reconvene, then we'll be keen to start that road safety program again, subject to the COVID-19 restrictions. With the integration for false alarms, unwanted fire alarm signals, a really positive outcome is the integration of a watch commander in the Dornoch District Office. I've now got a fire safety enforcement officer, Watch Commander David Bell, and he's been able to engage directly with local organisations and stakeholders and get out there and really make a difference and offer advice and guidance on reducing their unwanted fire alarm signals. A number of challenges around unwanted fire alarm signals during COVID, particularly, have been the care homes, because we've, as a fire and rescue service, we've introduced a number of task cards which detail how we manage operational incidents and situations involving COVID, potential COVID risk, and care homes, as you'll obviously realise, is one of them. Additionally, through the work that our operational intelligence gathering has achieved over the last 2 years, we've been able to work closely with hoteliers, local stakeholders and businesses to identify how we can best support them as they start to return to a normal. Their businesses are adapted to make them COVID safe, and we can support them both in terms of fire safety and them changing their arrangements for one-way systems and everything that they want to put in place to enable social distancing. So outside the reporting period, COVID-19 has presented a number of challenges for us, particularly accessing properties. that have been locked down and responding to fire alarms, but the communities across Sutherland have been phenomenal in supporting us and enabling us to continue doing what we do. Recruitment across Sutherland has stalled, obviously due to COVID. One of the challenges from our side is really getting them through a selection process and the medical and doing that safely. And work's going on with our health and wellbeing teams and the NHS to try and kickstart our recruitment process back. At the moment, for my area, I've got 7 people with an application in to join Bonner Bridge as a result of a very, very positive recruitment drive in that area. I've got 1 waiting to join Dornoch, and I've got 2 waiting to join Legg. One of the positive outcomes of the COVID lockdown has been the availability of the appliance, and we've seen a resilience across Sutherland of about 98%. People have been furloughed and away from their primary employment, so they've been able to give us significant availability. Across my area, I've got 2 personnel who have been shielding and are supported by us as a fire and rescue service, and 1 or 2 people have found a change in circumstances because of COVID have made it difficult, but continue with their employment with us, and 2 have left the service simply because they've gone away to find alternative work. 7 personnel in Caithness are now trained to drive ambulances should the Scottish Ambulance Service require resilient support from ourselves, which is a really positive undertaking on that stage. We've had no requests from Scottish Ambulance to carry out similar in Sutherland, although we have got a list of people who are prepared and ready to undertake that training if they're asked to. And finally, really just currently at the moment, all crews have returned to full training, although we've split them down into groups. So we've isolated them into groups of 2 or 3, depending on the number of stations. So typically it's 6 personnel training on a station over 2 or 3 nights. We've done a huge amount of work in COVID risk assessments for all fire stations to try and ensure that we maintain that resilience across the region. You'll be aware that we've supported the military, carried out COVID testing at Dornoch now for the past 3 months, and that's been a very, very successful partnership there. And we've developed a COVID testing centre at Dornoch Fire Station. And realistically, that is pretty much the end of the report, and I'd welcome any questions, but thank you very, very much, Chair.
Thank you, Jason, and thank you very much for that report. And before I open up to the other members of the committee, I'd just like to say that the work that you and your crews are doing in the area is very, very welcome, and I thank you very much for all the efforts that you put into Sutherland in general, and of course across Highland. I'm particularly delighted with the work that you're doing with the schools. It's so important, and I hope you manage to continue that. Okay. And impressed with the whole process of having drivers trained to drive ambulances. I think that's I like to see this cross agency working. To me, it is so important. And I'm delighted that you're also continuing the community safety aspect of things as well. It's very important. And to be honest, the stats that you've showed us are so encouraging. I think that's all down to the work that you and your crews put into the local area. So thank you for that again. Okay, I'm happy to take any questions or put any questions to Jason. Members, if you want to raise your hands. Councillor Morrison.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Jason, and I hope this finds you well. Just 2 or 3 questions I'll put to you, and you can just come back with the answers at the end if you have them. The first one is for a while the AFA in Tang, the automatic fire alarms at Tang Station was posing a bit of a problem and kept going off. Has that been sorted? Because it was a bit of an embarrassment that the appliances were leaving probably Lerg and Darnus and heading to Tang Station for a good number of weeks. So I would like to think that that's been sorted out now. Regarding availability, Lochinver seems to be back down to a worrying 4 in total. Is that people that's left the area, or is that just people that's sort of had a go at it and decided it's not for them? And also, does that figure include, is it Patricia, I think, that's working out of Lochinver now? Does that include her as well? And also, are we still at the 20 minutes to get to the station, or is that back down to 5 for some places? I know that 20, when it was increased from 5 to 20, it opened up a lot of avenues for people that were just outside that area of time limit to get to the station. So I was just wondering if that was still at 20. And I think, as Richard's already said about the work that's been put in, and the crews themselves during COVID. I mean, if there was an incident, they had to respond, and they were responding without thinking of their own health, you know, and that's just what happens when you join the fire brigade. You go and you do your bit, and so there's a lot of praise due to the people out there as well. And I just wondered about the ambulance side of it, because I know going back 3 or 4 years ago, maybe not so much now, but Northwest Sutherland was forever having another ambulance having to come into the area to double up because they were single crewed, and that's where the drivers from the fire brigade would have been worth their salt, because they had 2 ambulances coming to take a patient away, and there was one sitting while the 2 went to rest, and that's what started all this off, I think. So I just wondered why they're not. Is it because the availability is so much better in the ambulance crewing stations in this area that we don't need firefighters to be driving anymore? Or maybe you can enlighten me on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Morrison. And yes, I'm very well, thank you. Hope you. In response to Tong Fire Station, Tong Fire Station is managed by my colleague Jim Donaldson, the station commander for Caithness. What I'll do is I will ask Jim if that's been resolved, and if you'll allow me to, I'll reply to you off station and give you an update on that. I'm not aware. Lochinver is managed by my station commander colleague Aldine Woodward. Aldine's fairly new into the area. The figures at Lochinver at the moment are showing 4, and Patricia has, very much in the same vein as Andrew Mackay, she's progressed into the rural full-time watch commander support role, and is supporting that northwestern corner, including Kinlochbervie, Denness, Scowry, Lochinver. Again, what I'll do, if I may, is I'll refer to Aldine. I don't know whether she's got any applicants sitting in the side, or whether she's got anybody that's shielding her away. I really don't know, but again, I'll send you a separate response to that. And realistically, in terms of the ambulance response, I think we're pretty robust where we're at the moment, and speaking to local ambulance service colleagues at Sutherland, we're fine. We've not had a formal request for fire service personnel to undergo training. I know that request went through again, Station Commander Jim Donaldson in Caithness, but I really couldn't comment and don't understand as to what their crewing levels are for Sutherland and how that differs to Caithness.
To answer all your questions, Hugh?
Just the 20-minute rule to station. Is that still? Sorry.
Yeah, I beg your pardon. For the stations I've got, yes, at the moment, all of my stations, I really work within, you know, a 5-10 minute response time for the stations I've got, and certainly with Bonner Bridge, we've had a very positive outcome from the recruitment drive that we've done there, and all the people for Bonner Bridge live either within Bonner Bridge or Ardguy, and can respond to the station within 5 minutes. Again, I'm not aware of any recruitment that I've got that's extended that time to 20 minutes. And we've got I'm working certainly across Sutherland on sort of 5-6 minutes as my benchmark for them to respond.
Yeah, just sorry, Chair, if I can just come back on that. The reason that it was extended to 20 was to help the likes of Lochinver, for people that lived out of Lochinver that couldn't get there within 5 minutes. They extended it to 20 so that you could include the whole of Assynt. And the reasoning behind that at the time was that if you got somebody to the station within 15 minutes, it was better than having to wait 3/4 of an hour for Athley or Scourie to come, and that was the reasoning was behind that, and that was back maybe 4 or 5 years since that was introduced. And I just wondered if, you know, people change and times change, and I just wondered if that was still live. Like, so.
When I'll speak to Aldine about that and what her recruitment criteria is for Lochimber. And then I know that we've looked at, and certainly Bonner Bridge, one of the challenges, we had an application from a gentleman who lived on the Dornoch side of Spinningdale, and the big challenge really there was that the pages that we give the crews didn't work that far away from the station, which was a challenge. But what I'll do, Councillor, with your permission, is I'll speak to Aldine and I'll get a separate response to you that highlights that particular issue at Lochimber.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. I've got Councillor Mackay, followed by Councillor McGilvery.
Thank you very much, Chair. And Jason, thank you very much for your report, which is always welcome. And I'd like to commend your energy and enthusiasm, which we're seeing reflected in your recent recruitment successes. We know recruitment is an ongoing issue in Sutherland, so well done. It's good news. I have a request. It's in regard to driving ambitions and your reference to the use of goggles. I think you did a demonstration maybe a year or 18 months ago, which I wasn't able to attend. Would it be possible to have access to goggles or just learn a bit more about them? As you know, I'm, as the chair, a very strong supporter of driving ambitions and the value, and fire service input to the initiative has always been very good and I feel very effective. So yes, at a time convenient to yourself or someone else, I'd like to just meet with you in respect to goggles. Thank you.
Absolutely, and for those that have tried them and used them, they are a very, very effective tool in terms of engaging with young people. We can actually put a young person, we can put them in the vehicle, we can put them in as part of a road traffic collision and as a part of a tri-service emergency response to a road traffic collision, and particularly and all the community safety advocates, but those that work on the driving ambition praise the use of technology in this every time. It really is a positive, and yes, I'd welcome the opportunity to let any of you that haven't tried the goggles have a go. They're very strange.
Yeah, thank you for that, Jason. Councillor McGilvery.
Thank you, Chair. Jason, I'm aware of an interesting situation in semi-detached council property in Rogart some time ago, which seemed to involve overnight the spontaneous combustion of a scrap car. And I assume that fire service officers have given the householders involved some rigorous advice as to how they should conduct themselves in future.
I'm not aware of it, Councillor, but at the end of this meeting, I shall go and have a look, and I will confirm to you whether any advice was offered. But I'm not aware of that incident off the top of my head.
No worries, Jason. Thank you.
But if I can talk to you off table, Jim, we'll have a look at it. I'll identify the rough date and I'll speak to you about it from there.
That's great, Jason. Thank you very much indeed. Do you have any other questions from members? I notice we've got Councillor Munro with us now. Welcome, Linda. I know you had some IT problems, so what we've just had is Jason's report to the committee, and I think you've already been sent a copy. So if do you have any questions you'd like to put to Jason at the moment? No. Okay. Well, if there's no more questions, well, thank you once again, Jason, for your attendance today. It's greatly appreciated, and we really appreciate the work that you and your crews do across Sutherland. So thanks again.
Yeah, thank you very, very much. And yeah, you know, by all means, please, if there's anything we can do to support you, or if there's any questions that you want, or if there's any support we as an organisation can give you, I'm on the end of the email or on the end of the phone. Please don't hesitate to get in touch.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much indeed. You're welcome to stay with us if you wish, but I'm sure you've probably got other things you need to be doing. So thank you for your attendance.
Thank you very much. If you don't mind, I will leave the meeting. I've got a couple of other things to do this morning. But thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Okay, members, going on to item 4, we are very fortunate to have the Executive Chief Officer for Education and Learning with us today. That's Mr. Paul Senior. As well as being the ECO for Education and Learning, he is also, by default, the ECO for Sutherland. So that's an additional responsibility for him. So very happy to have you with us today, Paul. And if you want, I believe you're going to give us an update on return to schools. So I'll just pass it over to yourself.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, members. And it's good to join you in this forum, and I thank you for the invitation to come along to this forum and update you on progress for the reopening of our schools and settings in August, but also to in terms of our relationship going forwards as the ECO for this district. I have to begin by saying, unfortunately, at 11:30, I'm going to have to leave the meeting due to a short notice request from Scottish Government to have an emergency meeting with them regarding a matter. So I do apologise in advance. In future, I'll ensure full attendance at these meetings. But unfortunately, Scottish Government yesterday were quite insistent that I need to have this conversation with them at 11:30. But if anything comes up after I've left, please do let me know, and I will ensure speedy response. So, having, I suppose, week 6, working with the organisation that is the Highland Council and working with you all. In my time working in local and national government in England in recent years, I've had the good fortune to work in a number of national roles and regional roles and local government roles, and visited lots of local authorities, from the mediocre to the outstanding, and having sat in this forum and equivalent in other authorities as well. So, you know, I bring a lot of learning, I think, from other authorities, but as I've said to many colleagues, I don't come to Highland or to this meeting with a blueprint of, you know, what works and what doesn't in terms of, you know, the way forwards. I think there's some good practices going on in Highland with regards to the education recovery and the education return space. I'm seeing some good things, and I'll share some of that with you during my segue here. My update with you follows recent members' briefings with regards to the reopening of our schools and also last week's Education Committee. And I thank you as a collective, as a group, for recognising the significant efforts of all of those colleagues who service the education ecosystem, as I call it. And that's not just in our schools and settings, that's also our colleagues in transport, our colleagues in catering, our colleagues in facilities management, our colleagues in IT, our colleagues, our parents and carers who have played an important role in making sure the needs of children and young people over recent weeks and months have been met in such an unprecedented circumstance that we find ourselves operating in currently. There's a number of key moving parts that the whole Highland education system has really stepped up, that people have played a role. I think the previous investment in Chromebooks in IT has really paid off. When I speak to my equivalent in other local authorities, not just in Scotland, but in England as well, some local authorities have been found wanting that lack of investment in IT as we move towards more of a reliance on blended learning and a stronger reliance on the use of IT infrastructure. Those authorities that potentially haven't invested as much have been exposed. So Highland Council as a region, through that previous investment, are well positioned. In terms of, as previously referenced in various meetings, we have been working with our head teachers and our partners in other agencies. We've been working towards 3 scenarios, basically, in recent weeks, in terms of the reopening. Recent notification from national government that the expectation now is for August is that we're working to 100% return in terms of learners returning to schools with no social distancing measures to be deployed. That in essence means business as usual for schools and settings and providers and partners. So it's a big challenge. Obviously, this is going to be dependent on the R number going down and staying down and the environment's being as risk-free as possible. We've also been scenario-based planning with option B, which is 100% return, but with 1 metre social distancing measures been deployed. As you would imagine that our schools in the main don't have the infrastructure and capacity to manage that alone. So we've had to give consideration to the use of additional buildings and facilities to be able to achieve that. Previously, prior to the recent notification from national government, we'd been working to option C, which is the 50% return to schools and the other 50% being the use of home learning and blended learning and so forth. Those options B and C are important, but they are now contingency based on what happens with option A. So 50%, and I would say whilst on that criteria, the schools in the Sutherland area are actually favoured. done very well in terms of a number of the schools are actually over and beyond 50% criteria, whereas a number of our schools in other parts of the local authority were struggling to get to that 50% criteria. A number of our schools in the Highland region, in the Sutherland area, should I say, managed to get beyond the 50% criteria through a lot of endeavour, flexibility and hard work. So that should be recognised at this juncture. But as I said at the outset, the 100% criteria is the primary objective now. I've just chaired a meeting of the programme board, the schools reopening board, which I chair, which has input from all stakeholders or key subgroups and looking at progress made there. Transport's a big barrier. You don't need me to tell you that. The transport infrastructure for Highland in terms of getting our children and young people to schools and settings in the best of times is stretched. And it's a national conversation that's going on. Now, I understand there's going to be an announcement today by national government with regards to transport, particularly with regards to learners on schools. So we'll be watching naturally to see the outcomes of that, because there are ambiguities with regards to children and young people having to wear face masks or not having to wear face masks on closed vehicles or not. So the clarity, hopefully, we will get from the national announcement today will go a long way to demystifying any gaps in our learning. Our primary concern remains on safety and well-being of our children and young people and their communities. That is our primary determinant. Nothing else matters. I think, yes, we'd like to get our learners back into school, but we're going to be driven by what the risk assessments tell us, what the data tells us, the management of risk. And prior to coming to Highland, yes, I've been involved in national level developments in England with the Department for Education and Secretaries of State and working with other local authorities in this space. So I suppose I bring a bit of learning, but I'm not an expert. No one's a specialist in this area. This is the first time this has happened to all of us. So we can learn from what's going on elsewhere, but fundamentally we still have to find a Highland solution in response to Highland specific circumstances. And then we have to look at each local area as well within Highland. So the work of the subgroups that I've set up that have been in place for the last 5-6 weeks, we have had a subgroup for the north, for the west, for the south, for the mid area, to make sure that head teachers and local stakeholders are part of those local conversations in terms of what are the barriers in the local area, what are the opportunities, what are the solutions. As part of our programme of consultation and co-production, we've been working with our parents and carers. I was very keen that that was a design principle in terms of how we go about our business. My second week in office, we met with 180 parents and carers from the Highland Parent Council Partnership to make sure that they were part of the process. And whilst maybe not all of them were fully on board totally, and there was a nervousness, there was anxiety out there amongst our parents and carers, as you would expect, it's a nervous situation, but people got the design principles and appreciated the communication and the opportunity to contribute to the shaping and designing of our plans, which you will have seen in recent weeks with the design of our webpage, with a focus on schools reopening and development of key documents, such as the frequently asked questions document for parents and carers, schools and settings. And the webpage has some helpful timely information from national government, as well as local developments as well. And that's going to be an iterative process, which will be updated on a regular basis as more and more information becomes available. But as I said, the management of risk and the safety and well-being of our staff and our children and our young people remains at the forefront. And that will be the primary determinant with regards to how our schools open and when they reopen and what that looks like. So I suppose that kind of gives you an overview. In a nutshell, really, we're still working to option A, which is the 100% return. We know social distancing. We're receiving information from national government on a daily, weekly basis. Earlier this week, we received feedback from HMIE with regards to our report that we previously submitted, with regards to which was a focus on risk assessments, operational plans, and our approach. And when I used to inspect local authorities, and I used to be that bad guy that would go into a local authority and say that the quality of practice isn't fit for purpose, or I would say that as a governing body or as members, you're in special measures. I've operated in that space as a commissioner. I would endeavour to be as negative as possible. The report, if I'm looking at it through a negative lens, has several recommendations, but the report is quite favourable in terms of that we're doing the right things. Colleagues would be well aware that the Edinburgh plan publicly was not named and shamed, but the First Minister was very public that the Edinburgh plan wasn't good enough recently. Our plan has come back favourably. We're in the draft phase, so I can't share it with you, but the intention will be that we'll take the report, the feedback from HMIE to the Education Committee in August. And once we get the final version, we'll be able to share that with members as well. But we're in that period where you receive 10 working days to contest any perceived factual inaccuracies whilst it's a draft report. And then once that's over, then it can be formally shared as well. So we'll be sharing that in due course. So positive recognition from national government with regards to our plans and our processes, comparing favourably with others. Positive consultation and engagement with regards to parents, carers. Our head teachers have been part of the journey as well. They've played an important role, but good support from our colleagues in transport, from catering, from facilities management, from IT, to ensure that we have a whole system approach. It's not just what's going on in the schools and settings. There's been a lot of investment of time and energy and resource, but risk assessments and the management of risk being at the front end of what we do. So hopefully that gives you a bit of a whistle-stop tour to complement what's been said in Education Committee recently and the recent members briefing. So that concludes my verbal update. And if through the chair, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you for that, Paul. It was very informative. I think, can I ask everybody to mute their microphones, please, because they're getting better feedback there. So, yeah, so thank you, Paul, for that information. That was really, really useful. I'm personally delighted to see that the drive towards returning 100% with no social distancing is the preferred format at the moment. I think it's so important that our children get back to school and get back to some kind of normality. I know from feedback I've had from various sources that there has been a mental health impact on youngsters, and it's played heavily upon them. They've been several months now without having any contact with their peers, and it's so important we get back to some kind of normality from. With regards to transport, if we're heading towards 100% return in August with no social distancing, how does that affect the transport situation? I mean, the information I had was that they're still looking at social distancing on the school buses. I'm wondering why that would be necessary, apart from obviously the impact on the drivers. That's how we can shield the drivers to ensure their safety. So can you give me any update on that aspect of it at all, please?
Thank you, Chair. The most recent information we've had at this morning's board meeting where transport fed back progress is, there have been lots of conversations with ATCO, which is the National Association for Transport, and also with other local authorities and Scottish Government. And apparently we'll be getting that announcement later on today with regards to social distancing and the wearing of face masks or not wearing a face mask. So we'll be getting that clarity. Naturally, we'll have to respond to the national determination as best as we can to make best use of our situation. Social distancing on transport, make no bones about it, if we had to implement that at 2 meters, we will be looking at best only being able to use 20% of our capacity. So a coach that could accommodate 70 young people normally, we would only be able to accommodate 14, get my maths right, 14. So the system, as I've said, at the best of times, Councillor Gale, is maxed out with regards to what we can provide. In COVID time, maintaining social distancing, it would be beyond what we can provide. We would have to look at creative measures such as maybe fuel vouchers for parents to be able to help their children get to school, or maybe some other creative solutions. The Transport Support Group have looked at in terms of looking at option B and C, have looked at some potential creative scenarios. But as I said, we're working to 100% with no social distancing measures being required. The best outcome is the announcement today tells us that there will be no need for social distancing on transport, subject to the R number being low enough and risk being managed. That's the best possible outcome, because that would mean, as I say, business as usual, as best as is possible. But we await the announcement later on today, and hopefully it will give us the clarity that we require. But at this moment in time, the only information I can give to you from our transport colleagues who have been in touch with their colleagues in other local authorities in Scotland and the National Association and Scottish Government is that basically, if we're maintaining 2 meters social distancing on our vehicles, we would be only able to use 20%. The system would be beyond us in terms of, we just wouldn't have the infrastructure to manage that. So we would need parents, we would need a whole load of support and other creative solutions to meet that need.
That's great. Thank you, Paul, for that. Sorry, Paul, can I ask you to mute? Thank you. That feedback there. Yeah, I just like, before I pass on to the other members, and I'm seeing lots of hands up, I just like to express my gratitude to the teaching staff who have really worked really hard to pull the different scenarios together, particularly for the 2 meter scenario. I know there's been an enormous amount of work gone in on that, and it's all credit to them for doing that. And I'm not quite sure how they feel about the constant changing from 1 meter to 2 meters, etc. But they've done a tremendous job. So if you can, I'm happy to pass on my thanks to them for that. So moving on, I've got Councillor McGilvery with his hand up, and followed by Councillor Curry.
Thank you, Chair. I noticed a comment by Lindsay Patterson, Professor of Education at Edinburgh Uni, with particular interest recently. I taught him many years ago in Tain, and he seems to have been none the worse for the experience. And his comment was that an additional 6 hours per week would be required for secondary pupils to bring them up to make up the lost ground they've had. Now, timetables will be well and truly set for the coming year, whichever percentage of activity we have, but we still have this Friday afternoon in the secondary school curriculum, which is blank for a number of years. Will that be used in any sense, or is it be considered to be used, or is that something that can be left to individual head teachers and their ASGs to actually make best use of? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor, for that question. With regards to closing the gap, I think the data tells us, not just in Highland, but nationally, in terms of our learners have missed out a significant amount of their learning, their development, and obviously mental health and well-being is going to be a significant gap. The intention is that when our learners return to schools and settings in August, we will need to undertake some form of assessment to endeavour to identify what the gaps would be based on where they should be. Our head teachers are incredibly resourceful, resilient, creative, innovative, as we've already proved, the ability to flex and adapt their plans on a regular basis in recent times. Based on what the data tells us, Councillor, in terms of coming back our way and how we close that gap, of course, we'll consider all options. And these are conversations that will take place with our head teachers post-assessment when we return. We've been having weekly conversations, as I've said. My officers, my area care and learning managers have been leading these local conversations. So each area, the north, the south, the west, the mid areas have been having weekly conversations with their head teachers collectively. Our head teachers have been challenging and supporting each other and working in clusters and working in small cohorts as well. But basically what I'm trying to say, if the data tells us there's a need to close the gap based on learning and where they should be, all options will be considered. I'm not going to commit to what that solution will look like at this juncture until we've got the data come back and tell us how far the gap is. But that potentially, Councillor, could be one scenario, absolutely, how we bridge that gap.
Thank you, Paul. Councillor Curry.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I've got a couple of points I'd like to bring up on. Mr. Senior, please can you clarify why some pupils and parents in Highland are being told, particularly my ward, are being told that they are not permitted to bring hand sanitizer onto school buses when the schools go back. I know that many parents are exceptionally annoyed by this kind of diktat that's come out. It's not good. Kids need to be keeping as clean as possible. And why shouldn't, I think there was a suggestion, but this might have been from some teenagers, that they were drinking it. However, I don't think that's a real, I don't know, I'd like some clarity on that. You've been over the arrangements for school buses, which, yeah, we'll just need to wait and see. My last point was in relation to the kind of disparity of what's been going on for children and young people, and particularly in the secondary setting. And that's between Golspie, for example, and Tain, which are not in my ward, but children from my ward attend those schools. So children in Golspie have been quite enjoying using Google Meets, and because it's been a school that's been a key worker school, there's been teachers in school, and they've been able to very cheaply and very easily organise webcasting out to the kids. Whereas children who have been attending Tain, for example, one child was handed a 97-page PDF on physics. And when they asked their teacher a question on it, 2 days later, the teacher responded in an email, it's in the document. 14-year-olds are not going to sit and read a 97-page document on physics. So I'd like to see that going forward. My point is here, this was new for everyone, don't get me started on that. But I'd like to see going forward a contingency built into all of our schools where we have a plan for children who either cannot attend because of a pandemic or whatever community problem there is. And also for children who are disabled and cannot leave home, because there's a lot of homeschooling going on. And I'd like to see a kind of gold standard based on what we've learned that has worked and what hasn't worked during the last few months for children and young people. But I do feel like there's a huge disparity, which I'd like to kind of have on the record here, that not all children are getting access to quality teaching and learning. And some children have and really enjoyed it. I'd like to kind of level that out and create a kind of template, if that would be possible. And the last point I wanted to make was kind of following on from Councillor McGilvery's point about how much teachers have been stepping up and been fantastic. I'd like to direct everyone, if they will indulge me, into some of the YouTube videos that have been coming out of actually Tainwell Academy for some of the stuff they did on history. It was absolutely fantastic, and I know children in my ward really enjoyed tuning in to find out what Bonnie Prince Charlie, who was actually a cross-dressed head teacher, was getting up to that day. So some of that stuff has been absolutely fantastic, but I'm very mindful that not all subjects and not all children have had access to such quality learning and teaching opportunities. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Curry. Some key points made there. With regards to the comment about parents being told that their children should not be bringing hand sanitizer onto transport, that's the first time I'm hearing that. So I can't give you a response to that, but I would appreciate if you could drop me a line, an email. I will follow up with the transport team on that to understand what the context and the narrative is behind that to get full data. As I've said, that is the first time that that's been brought to my attention, and I've had a number of meetings with our transport colleagues, and I don't recall that being referenced in any way, shape or form. So if you can provide me with that information directly, I will undertake to follow up on that. With regards to the variable practice during lockdown across our schools, across 203 schools, 2,500 teaching staff, 50,000 children and young people, 0 to 19, there's going to be a significant degree of variability. I'm not saying it's an excuse. We have an obsession on the quality of practice being right, and there should be a baseline core offer or core standard across our schools and settings for our children and young people during such time. But as we've acknowledged, we're learning by doing to a degree. There is no roadmap for this. What we need to do is ensure that lessons are learned for how we've gone about our business as an ecosystem. And as I say, that's what's going on in schools and the key independency agencies and support services to make sure that we can do as best as we can. There's been a lot of reactive learning throughout this in terms of where, as I say, things have happened and we've had to adapt and adjust in response to the latest information received or the latest risk or the escalation of risk. So by no means can I say to you that our approach has been perfect. As a member of the Association of Directors of Children's and Education Services in England, I had the joy of chairing the Pan-London group across 33 local authorities, which covers 6,000 schools in England. And even with my learning, I couldn't say to you I've got all the answers on this. No one has all the answers on this. There are mistakes been made with the Highland programme. There's absolutely no doubt about it, but that will be the same in every local area. What we have to do is maximise learning from this to ensure that when we do have a second round, or if it does come back again, we're actually ahead of the curve and we're better positioned and our offer is better. But I would be keen, agreed, that we have a Highland gold standard bar that's better than the rest. So there's a lot of learning that will need to take place. There's lots of lessons learned as well. When I used to inspect local authorities, whether it be, or when I've worked in big authorities like Birmingham with 460 schools or Staffordshire with 450 schools, I've been obsessed with the quality of practice across my settings. And that will be a key driver for me during my time in Highland, that irrespective of where children go to schools, which part of the region, that we should have a baseline offer. And it'll be no different if we have to engage in such a period or process again. So there'll be lots of lessons learned. And I appreciate variable practice. We need to have, as I say, equity of offer, regardless of where our children attend school or learning. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Paul. Councillor Munro.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Paul. Across Highland, we have a number across Highland, we have a significant number of children and young people who normally do fine in mainstream education, but they have underlying conditions such as severe asthma or diabetes type 1. How do you plan to have them attend full-time education?
Good morning, Councillor Munro, and thank you for the welcome, and thank you for the question. When again, coming back to my time working in local government or inspecting local authorities, for me a key barometer of the local area was how they looked after or met the needs of the most vulnerable. And the question you've just presented, Councillor Munro, with regards to some of those who are most at risk and most vulnerable, it's important that we undertake not just risk assessments for our schools and settings to ensure that the environment is ready as possible and safe and secure as possible, but for our vulnerable children, there is an expectation that our schools are undertaking individual risk assessments, Councillor Munro, because the individual risk assessment will determine what's right for that child, that learner, in terms of returning to school. And for some of them, whilst we might have an aspiration and intention that they return 100%, for some of them, they're going to need a phased approach. For some of them, they'll need a bespoke programme. We'll take it, whilst we've got the 100% criteria as an ambition, we will have to look at bespoke approaches and solutions for each and every one of our learners, particularly the most vulnerable, So, as I say, individual risk assessments, Councillor Munro, and I say individual risk assessments per child will be critical to inform what their offer can be and what can be achieved and what can't be achieved. That and only that will determine what's right for individual children. It's not a generic approach when it comes to the most vulnerable and the most at risk. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that, Paul. I'm not seeing any other hands up. I'm also conscious that you've got to go to your other meeting at 11:30. So thank you very much for your attendance today. It's greatly appreciated. And I look forward to working with you, not just from an education perspective, but also from a Sutherland perspective. And we hope to welcome you back to our next committee meeting, which I think will be in November. So thank you for your attendance.
Chair, thank you for the invitation. Thank you for the challenge and support. And I think it's been a helpful challenge and support, because each of these conversations I take away further information that feeds into the mix of how we improve our systems and our processes, and whether it be the FAQ documents or our comments. So I do thank you, and I look forward to working with you all. Still based in London at the moment. The flights have only just resumed, but the intention is to be up with you guys in August, and I'm looking forward to meeting each and every one of you individually and collectively. But in the meantime, thank you. Please, if you have information regarding the region that you need me to follow up on as being the lead eco, please send me directly. But otherwise, I'll, in the meantime, look forward to working with you in the near future. Thank you all.
Many thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, members, now we move on to item 5 on the agenda, which is the COVID-19 response. And we've got Phil Tomlin, our ward manager, who's going to give us an update, first of all, on the council community response to COVID-19. So, Phil, it's over to you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. Right, I'm just going to share the presentation with you. Hopefully, this will work. Right, okay. Can everybody see that?
Yeah, we can see that.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. Right, okay. So, what I have here is a very quick overview of the Highland Council response to COVID-19. This is a presentation that has been made to area committees across Highland, but it has been adapted to reflect the circumstances in Sutherland. Okay, so firstly, the Scottish Government asked local authorities to establish humanitarian assistance centres. In Highland, this offered support to over 8,000 people who were shielding, and also other people who were vulnerable, whether through health or through change of circumstances resulting from COVID emergence. Specifically, Highland Council has provided the things on this slide: a helpline for requests for assistance, 10 local community hubs, and there'll be a little bit more about that just in the next slides, which included for Sutherland, one based in Golspie High School. That was supported by a central distribution hub from Inverness, where food was sorted and distributed to the local community hubs. And also there's a virtual hub which facilitated people who were shielding to make contact with the Scottish Government so they could access the services that were on offer, and also offered some support to the local community hubs. So these are the services that were provided in general through the local community hubs across Highland. And you can see it ranges from food support to signposting for other services. And there you get an indication of the number of and the proportion of each of the services that were provided. Specifically in Golspie, it was a 5-day-a-week operation, and as I say, was supported from the distribution hub in Inverness with food. Staff were provided by council services and also by volunteers from High Life Highland. The community groups really were the key partners, and there is more about that later. And they have taken a number of referrals from the local community hub, fulfilling things in their local communities. And perhaps most importantly, given the geography of our county, the service has been available throughout Sutherland. The key services out of the community hub in Golspie included various types of food delivery and support, welfare support from the team in Inverness. So if people made a request to the helpline, they were referred to experts there who could help them with benefits and the like. And also prescription and more lately water delivery for those on private supplies who were suffering during the warm spell we had in May. I think it's important to note the contribution of the Sutherland Community Partnership Food Network, which is a group chaired by Councillor Mackay, and that has supported community groups across Sutherland with food deliveries and with a kind of joint forum where people are able to swap best practice. In terms of the Golspie Local Community Hub and the Inverness Distribution Hub, we supported that network with transport from Aberdeen, bringing food across where it was broken up in Dornoch and then distributed around the county. So we council put on a lorry, and we also helped with some of the distribution within Sutherland with vans from the Golspie Hub. So these are the numbers for the local community hub in Golspie. I think that you will see that actually they're quite low, and for me that really reflects the strength of the community response. Routine ongoing support for food delivery has only been to half a dozen households, and if you look at the table there, you can see that the shopping or collecting shopping with a total of 52 over shielding and non-shielding groups, that was actually all fulfilled by community groups. So you can see the important role that the community groups played in supporting the work of the hub. But those numbers, actually, that only is referrals from the hub. The work that the community groups were doing is much greater than that, because they picked up most of their referrals and most of their clients locally through their local knowledge and network. I think the outstanding positive has been the community response. It was immediate and it was flexible, and it has been ongoing and sustained. And I think that members will be keen to express their gratitude and admiration for what communities have achieved. Certainly, council officers have been really delighted and incredibly reliant on that support from communities. I think, given the geography of Sutherland, the council would have really struggled to have met community need without that partnership with communities. Creating dependency is a concern, and I know that in discussion, including through the Sutherland Community Partnership Food Network, groups are now actively considering their exit strategies particularly on food deliveries, and how to reduce and prevent any future dependency. The key opportunity is to build on that partnership that we've created with communities. There's a real opportunity to support and enable community future action. And I think that, as it says on the slide, we have a rare chance to do things differently. So moving on to the next steps. Moving forward, the focus inevitably will be on those that are shielding. Currently, that's until the end of July. And also, we need to have an ability to react to people who are identified through contacts through the test and protect. And there may be people there who at very short notice have to go into quarantine and may need some support. So we need to be ready as an authority to respond to that. Discussions are ongoing with the Scottish Government regarding future financial support, but I don't have any information on that. And the Council in general is in general, as we move into recovery, reviewing its COVID response. Moving on to working with the communities then, the council's support to communities, in addition to that coming out of the local community hub, has been signposting volunteers, support through the ward budget, which members have approved all of those that have been paid, and then also advice and guidance, for example, through environmental health. The council's worked with nearly 340 groups, and 10% of those 34 have been operating in Sutherland, covering all 17 community council areas. There's a range of different things that people have been doing. For example, a community shop in Editon Hall, a food bank in Assynt, hot meals in Kinloch Burby, Scarry and Durness, community organised supermarket deliveries across the North Coast, and collecting, shopping and delivering food in Golspie. And I know that members have been involved with many of these initiatives. Some have been run by existing groups, some have been run by new ones, some are formal organisations and some are informal groups. There's a real mix of community action that's taken place. And that has been funded in part by the funding that you can see. That's the Highland position, so nearly £2.25 million. We're probably more interested in Sutherland. So £308,000. Really quite an impressive amount of money that's been invested in Sutherland. I think the high level of funding that we see reflects the balance between the strong community response and actually the quite limited requirements for direct support through the local community hub. So certainly communities, the needs in Sutherland have largely been met through community groups supported by the funding that you can see on that slide. Finally, these are the business grants that have been paid through the council to businesses in Sutherland. So you can see that that's nearly £5 million grants invested directly into Sutherland businesses. Okay, so that's all that I've got to say on the council response. I'm going to hand over now to Angela Simpson of HIE and 3 community partners to tell you about their experience in supporting communities through the COVID emergency. Okay, thank you very much. Right, just give me a second while I try and figure out how to get back. Okay, is that the presentation off? Okay, yeah, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Phil. Good morning, everybody. It is still morning, isn't it? Yeah, disappearing fast. Yeah, I just wanted to say a little bit about what HIE has been doing to support the community response in Sutherland. And of course, just to reiterate really everything that Phil has said there about the amazing response that has been from the community right from the very start. So an immediate response that covered the whole of Sutherland. And of course, we've seen something similar across the region and across the whole of Scotland. I'll try not to repeat, I've got a few facts and figures here, I'll try not to repeat some of the stuff that Phil's just gone through there, and I won't take very long, so just a few headlines, and then I'll hand over to the 3 community groups that we've got ready and waiting on the screen there. So HIE has been working closely with Scottish Government and a range of national partners in development of support for our communities in the Highlands and Islands, making sure that what's available is going to be tailored to the needs of our communities. That was happening at the very beginning and of course is still ongoing as we start thinking about what the recovery looks like. But right back in March, seems an awful long time ago now, but the Scottish Government, as you'll be aware, announced a £350 million investment package to support communities responding to the COVID-19 emergency across Scotland. The funding landscape was a bit tricky at the beginning. It wasn't that easy for us to navigate. Appreciate it wasn't easy for communities to navigate either. And of course, it was changing daily with new announcements. And inevitably, there were a few overlaps, but I think they're sort of ironed out now. But in simple terms, that £350 million, as you are aware, was divided up into 4 streams. So the Wellbeing Fund, the Food Fund, Third Sector Resilience Fund, and the Supporting Communities Fund. And it's that Supporting Communities Fund that HIE were able to administer on behalf of the Scottish Government just for the Highland area. And that fund was delivered to what we've called community anchor organisations. So it's particularly to help support local responses to the pandemic, that very much an emergency response or emergency fund And it was a streamlined application process designed to get the funding out there as quickly as possible to where it was needed most. And I think we've succeeded in doing that. We quickly identified the lead organisations across Sutherland, making sure that there was, or we knew who was dealing with the centre of the activity, if you like, across each of the community council areas. We identified 12 organisations that were willing to act as anchors, and in total they've now received about £300,000 of funding. So say very much about the emergency response, but we all know that it's tailing off in some areas, but very much ongoing. And that funding will keep them going until the end of September. Those anchors, as Phil said, have varied from development trusts, community councils and community-run hubs, each addressing similar challenges, but in slightly different ways. So we've heard it's about getting food and medicine out to the community, dealing with social isolation and supporting households experiencing financial difficulty. So the Supporting Communities Funds costs help to support things like information and communication, newsletters. Some communities set up websites, particularly to get that information out there easily. PPE for volunteers, purchasing food, fuel, material, essential goods. Setting up food larders, in some cases of course they existed, but expansion of those in order to respond, and getting hot meals out to vulnerable people in the community. It also covered volunteer expenses, supported some new social support networks, befriending services, and in some cases extra organisational overheads and staff costs just to make sure that the organisation could keep going and deliver those essential things. So I've kept in regular contact with those 12 groups, and we have 3 of them on the call today. We have a virtual meeting every 3 weeks or so, and I think that's helped to not only just cover the news and how things are developing, but to give some level of sort of peer-to-peer support as we try and navigate our way through this crisis. I think we're all very aware that the impact of this pandemic on a sort of social economic level is massive, and of course still changing. We're all talking about the restart and ultimately the recovery. We've heard those terms a few times already this morning, and I suppose it helps us helps us to feel that we're making progress, but very conscious that our communities are still dealing with the daily reminders that for many that crisis, I think, is still just beginning to unfold. But as we strive to highlight something positive to spark a recovery, perhaps we can build on these past few months where we saw our communities leading from the very beginning, with more collaboration between neighbouring communities and with local businesses. And I think in Phil's slides there, he picked up on some of the learning and positives that we've seen. But I don't want to say too much. This is really about our communities. So we have Ellen Lindsay from Badag on the call, Jim Johnston from Betty Hill, Strathnavel, Hara Community Council, and Marion McDougall from North Coast Connections in Tongue. And if I let them go one by one to tell their own story. So we'll start with Ellen, and I know Ellen is also sitting in the shop there. So yeah, looks like she's ready. Okay, hand over to you, Ellen. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm sorry about my little companion behind me. Can you hear me?
Yes,
we can, thank you.
Sorry. Yes, I'm sorry about my companion behind me. I'm in the otter's couch and I have all of the otter behind me. Okay, so as Angela said, thanks Angela, I'm representing Vrora. I belong to Badag, which is a development trust, but we're just a part of what we called Vrora Community Antivirus Group. So we're a partnership of 3 main groups in the village who were able to quickly react. We were lucky because Vrora has an existing resilience plan. We did have to do a little bit of adaptation quite quickly because, as is normally the case in our villages, most of our existing volunteers on the resilience group were in the over 70s vulnerable group. However, we did adapt quickly and we quickly formed 3 streams really who have worked together. So the community council took responsibility for gathering volunteers. We did already have some who were neighbourhood buddies on the original resilience, but they began to gather more volunteers. We started with about 30 at the beginning of the pandemic. We now have about 70 active volunteers who are what we're calling street buddies. So they're doing shopping for people, gathering prescriptions, even dog walking. Community Council also took responsibility for organising PPE for all these volunteers, and they set up a phone call system to help with isolation and mental health and so on. They also set up a volunteers messenger group on Facebook so that they could have regular contact with each other and be able to be picked up when things were really tough and to help keep each other going. And that worked really well. BADAG took responsibility for being the anchor organisation, so all the administration, the communication, sorting out the money, and BADAG also set up, as part of the communication, a Facebook page purely for the virus, so just a fact-based Facebook page where people couldn't interact and say awful things, but just sent out essential information to the community. BADAG also took responsibility later in the pandemic, when it looked as though we were going to require face masks, to organise the local making of face masks, and we distributed one to every person in the community, and they've had those for about a month already, so they're prepared now, since it's become mandatory to wear them in enclosed spaces. The whole village is prepared. We're also working with the school, looking at COVID-ready stationery packs for the children returning to school. We're organising all that sort of thing as well. And then the other big stream has been run in conjunction with Brora Village Hub, who already were doing a food parcel delivery service for vulnerable people prior to COVID. So that's been developed. We've recruited more volunteers, and over the period, we've delivered over 700 food boxes, so approximately 50 a week on average. So it built from about 15 at the beginning to 70 at the peak, to we're back down to about 20 odd after having done some reviews. So at the peak, we were feeding well over 100 people a week in the village. All, of course, thanks to the funding that has come from Sutherland Community Partnership through High, and also, as was mentioned by Phil, I think it was, the CFINE charity food distribution, which has come through Highland Council as well, which has been very welcome. So Brora Village have about 12 volunteers now who are organising and distributing the food. So all of that has worked really well, quite seamlessly in fact, and now it's time for us to think about the next steps as well. We're beginning to think about when we're going to stand down the street buddies, with shielding finishing quite soon. We're looking at continuous reviewing of the food box requirement, and also fuel poverty, which has actually just really started to rear its head as people come to the end of their personal resources. So that's going to be ongoing for a while. And it's time to look at what learnings we've gained and harness all these volunteers and hopefully keep some of them for other village activities in the future. And we also need to review all our learnings in case of a second wave, of course, so that we're ahead of the curve if we're needed to step up to the plate again. We're very grateful to have secured the additional funding to see us through to the end of September, and I think that that's about where we are for now. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Ellen. That's a really good update. We want to can we bring in Jim now, please? Hello, Jim. Can you hear us? I think you're on mute. You're still on mute, I think. Are you struggling to get it off mute, Jim? Oh, I think we lost Jim altogether now. Okay, well, can we try and bring Marion in then, please?
Hello, can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can hear you, Marion. Thank you.
Okay. As I'm representing North Coast Connection, in the middle of March, we immediately closed the Kyle Centre to community groups. We suspended all activities we were running there, and we cancelled or postponed all planned events. This was done with a heavy heart, as we'd worked really hard and was considerable success to move the Kyle Centre on from its previous life as a social work daycare facility to resource use by all the community. And we'd also successfully applied for funds for additional activities, and we're 2/3 of the way through a project employing a link worker to bring more people in and reduce social isolation. So our staff switched to working from home wherever possible, taking calls and phoning round our lunch club members each day that they would normally have come into the Kyle Centre. Our staff provide support, signpost other services available, and offered the delivery of a hot meal. We decided not to offer this routinely to all our members, as we felt we might need to target this service and reach out to more vulnerable people in the community, not currently engaged with us, but who would be adversely affected. Our volunteer visiting befriending service, which we run in partnership with Highland Hospice, switched to telephone support only. Our volunteer walk leader provides telephone support to all those who regularly joined our weekly Paths for All health walks. But we realised quickly that our own dedicated team of volunteers could become overwhelmed, and we put out an appeal for more volunteers on social media, and we're delighted with the response. And we wouldn't be able to do half the stuff we're doing without the support from the community. We worked with a local health centre and a local community transport organisation, T4T, to organise a doorstep delivery of prescription medicines. We liaised with local nursing staff to target hot meals to vulnerable adults, including those who are shielding. It was initially 2 days a week. With funding from Supporting Communities Fund, we were able to increase this to 3 days a week, and most recipients are receiving a meal on each of the 3 days. Delivering shopping was not seen as a priority for us, as the local businesses quickly set up a home delivery service while setting up systems themselves to reduce footfall and encourage cashless payments. And we were reluctant to introduce any activities which might adversely impact on local businesses, which generally have a rather fragile existence. But we are delivering a small number of food parcels once a week to households whose income has been affected by coronavirus. And those who are receiving hot meals from us have also been given a top-up of grocery items. We've sent out activity packs for younger children, and delivery of green health home packs will be distributed shortly. The other community activities, a local seamstress offered to make face masks for health centre staff quite early on. So I asked her if she'd be prepared to make a much larger number for the wider community, and she was happy to do this as a volunteer, and Town Community Council funded the materials required. As well as some prescriptions, T4T are also delivering shopping from the Co-op in Thurso, which enabled this service to be extended to cover tongue and wellness. Although we know that everyone's missing coming into the Kyle Centre and seeing their friends on our activities and the health walks, we're also aware that a lot of what we were doing before has increased the resilience of the community to cope with the current circumstances. For example, some of our groups, our craft workers and mums and tots, have previously set up their own Facebook pages, and they're keeping in touch with each other and supporting each other. With our wide reach into the community, it meant that we became the natural anchor point, but close links with T4T and the Community Council ensured that there was no duplication of effort. And our links with the primary care team and CAB means that we're reasonably confident that we're reaching everyone we need to, and hopefully we're mitigating a lot of the adverse social aspects of the situation. We're now starting to look about how we could reopen the Kyle Centre, taking into account all the current guidance. Okay, and that's everything I want to say. Thank you.
That's fantastic, Maureen. Thank you very much for that. I'm glad to see that we've got Jim back. So, Jim, if you want to give us your update, that would be great. Thank you. Sorry, Jim. We can see that you're trying to speak to us, but we can't actually hear anything. Is your microphone still on mute? No, sorry, guys. I think we'll have to admit defeat on that one. So I'm very sorry, Jim. We're getting too much feedback there, so the members aren't able to hear what you're saying, I'm afraid. So I mean, I'm very conscious. Sorry.
All right. Yeah.
That'll be great.
Yeah. You put it in an email, Richard. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine. That's
fine. Okay. Worth a try, Jim.
Yeah.
Sorry about that, Jim.
No problem.
The issues we have with technology, I mean, I think, to be honest, we've done remarkably well to actually hold this team meeting, this area committee meeting as we have. So it's just disappointing that Jim hasn't been able to give us his update. But I'd like to take this opportunity, first of all, to thank Angela, Ellen, Marion and Jim for coming on to the committee meeting. It's really important that we get a full understanding of what's been going on in the communities. I know from my own involvement within the community that the way that Sutherland always steps up to the mark across the county. There's absolutely no question about it. When we're faced with a challenge, Sutherland responds and responds positively, responds flexibly, and responds in a bespoke manner for each of the communities across the county. And every one of the anchor organisations and the many other organisations that have been involved have all done what's been needed in their own communities. And I'm very, very grateful to each and every one of them for the work that they've done over this very difficult and challenging time. I mean, people have stepped up to the mark when they've been handling money and big sums of money to support their communities, and we've had a lot of support from High and the confidence from High to allow the communities to devolve that money across the various parts of the community to support the most vulnerable people in their own areas. So I think that the cross agency working and the third sector working and even the unconstituted groups has been phenomenal. And as Phil has said in his presentation, it's been really recognised now, the impact that community organisations can make across the board. In other areas of Highlands where there hasn't been that similar response, the hubs that Phil has been working with have had a lot harder time in distributing food and supporting the vulnerable people in their areas. So the Sutherland response has been absolutely phenomenal, and I'm very grateful to each and every one of you for it. Hopefully, going forward, that we've got this amazing volunteer resource, we'll be able to capitalise on that. And I know that through the Recovery Board, they are looking at interacting with the voluntary organisations and third sector organisations across the Highlands to make sure that when we build recovery into the Highland Council, then we take into consideration the thoughts and ideas that can come from third sector organisations and from the communities as a whole. So hopefully we've learned that much more cooperative working with the community will lead to a better, more responsive Highland Council overall. So once again, thank you all for coming on to the call, and I really appreciate the efforts you're making. You're all welcome to stay with us as we go through the rest of our agenda. It's entirely up to yourselves. I won't be offended if you decide not to, but if you're interested in the rest of our agenda, as I say, you're more than welcome to stay. So thank you once again. Okay, members, we're going on now. Oh, sorry, I should have opened up for questions. I'm being neglectful here. Any questions from any of the members, or any comments that any of the members would like to make about the work of the communities? Councillor Munro.
Thank you, Chair. Simply to say that the communities did a fantastic job. They hit the ground running, and nobody, as far as I'm aware, in Sutherland, the length and breadth of Sutherland, fell through the cracks. So from High to getting the money out, to the way the communities managed it, to meeting the need, and as Marion identified, actually going that extra mile to people who maybe don't normally use services and whatever, to make sure that they were covered. I think communities across Sutherland played an absolute blinder.
Thank you for that, Linda. Any other comments or questions anybody's got? Councillor Mackay.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'd just like to echo the sentiments made by yourself and Councillor Munro. I mean, the effort has just been absolutely fantastic. But within that sits opportunities for the future. You know, we're not out of the woods yet. The world, you know, as we knew it, literally changed overnight. And we're now sitting with plans and locality plans that were drawn up over many, many months, and considerable effort put into them are really maybe not quite null and void, but we're going to have to revisit them and revise them, look at the actions and make sure they're fit for purpose. Now, sitting alongside that, we've been fortunate in securing the funding for the project officers, whose task was originally to support the 5 localities. I think very sensibly what has been agreed that yes, that work will still proceed, but in addition to supporting the 5 localities, we're going to also take a pan-Sutherland approach because the whole county has been affected and there are common denominators across the piece. So I think that is a sensible thing to do. But the opportunity to make these plans as robust as possible, I think sits very much in us continuing to work with the groups on the ground, who have we've got new people, new skills, new thinking, new ideas, and a tremendous energy. So to harness that can only be to the benefit of Sutherland. The CAB have evidence that, over the past 2 weeks in particular, they're seeing a rise in new customers, new clients. So these are people whose savings are, are perhaps drying up, but they're beginning to really feel the bite of the impact of COVID. So we've got a lot of hard work ahead of us, I think, but working closely with the volunteers that we now have on the ground will be able to do as much as we can to get our county back on its feet again. So again, a big thank you to you all and your hard work. Thanks.
Thank you for that. If there's no other questions or comments, we'll move on to the next agenda item. And thank you once again for your attendance, Angela, Ellen, Marion and Jim. Okay, members, next item on the agenda is the Sutherland Roads update. And I believe we have Joanne Sutherland with us, and Joanne's been sitting quietly just waiting for her turn. So Joanne, welcome to the committee meeting, and if you want to give us an update on where we are with the roads. I know things have been difficult for you guys, and I know there have been issues with absence and everything else. I know you've had your challenges, so it'd be interesting to know how you've actually managed the whole COVID-19 experience. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Members will have received the report put together which sort of detailed the measures we took following the government announcement on lockdown back in March. Basically, we sort of applied the rule of 1 person per vehicle, and where PPE was available and we could maintain that, we did. There was I'll call it a couple of weeks adjustment for the operatives to sort of get their head around what was being asked of them and how they would work. But generally after that period, we had as full a turnout as we could, given the fact that we had a very low number, I have to say, of staff that were shielding but were in the high risk, diabetes, COPD. So we weren't too badly hit on the operational side. Staff side in the offices, everybody had the ability to pack up and work from home, or they were in remote offices and could continue working. So we were particularly lucky. I mean, as everybody will appreciate, the network issues early days did give some levels of frustration on trying to continue working as normal, but we've worked all around that, as everybody have. And so staff levels, we're pretty good. We have, as I've commented there, had some scheduled retirements. 2 roads officers and a roads operative have retired, and as yet, the recruitment process hasn't sort of restarted, but there are proposals to fill these posts. There's been a couple of resignations that have just come out recently, but we've got, same again, recruitment is in plan to fill these in. So we weren't too particularly badly offended at the start, upset, but we take on board there was an action sort of taken just before lockdown for the whole of the roads squad, Tracy Addy led on it, where we reviewed the activities that we were doing, what were deemed essential council-wide and what was needed to keep the network safe for the public that were going to be out on it and the emergency services. And that was what's been provided in Appendix 1, and it detailed more than just the operational, it was the technical side, all the other background stuff that we do that is required by us under legislation. So it's a fairly detailed bit, but it sort of was split into the various elements. And essentially on the road, we were to maintain the potholes, not let them to deteriorate, and deliver the winter service, because we were still in the winter period at that time. That passed without any major winter event coming before the middle of March, so that was passed without event. We then just continued on the actions that we were permitted to do, but as we had a fairly high level of turnout, we also took the view that we should maybe prevent emergencies. So the activities we undertook were with a view to what do we need to address that would not give us a problem in the future. And if you go through the list on Appendix 2, there was we did a rock removal activity up in Scowrie, which it took advantage also of the reduction of traffic on. We didn't have high levels of traffic to worry about, so there was a balance to be found of what we could do, what was preventative, and what would benefit us and not give us a problem. You know, the Scowrie issue, if that rock had come down in the middle of the COVID situation, we could have had a road closure. So there was that balance of that we did, and the guys all came out and worked well. We did engage an external contractor for the specialist part of it, but that was the sort of activities we took a view on whether we could deal with them. I have to say, not having a capital programme, as you're aware, the budgets have been put on hold, enabled us to look at a lot of little activities that we could do with the smaller squads, maintain social distancing. So there's probably a lot of little niggly things, maybe not niggly in the wider sense to the public, but for us in the background, that we've managed to pick up on and address. Smaller culvert replacements, that kind of thing. So members are just asked to note everything that we've undertaken in this time and be mindful that the Sutherland roads team have, I have to say, they've turned out, they've been cooperative, they've been willing to work. Even the guys that have been off have been asking, when can I come back? So they're a good team, and they've done really well in this time. We've assisted waste. I think we're still assisting waste where they've had issues. The guys have given their time helping with the food deliveries, the big deliveries that Phil referred to that came into Dornoch. They were out with their normal hours. They gave their time freely to do things like this. So in the wider area, they've been helping as well. Maybe just not the high profile stuff. So yeah, it's just an acknowledgement of the activities we've undertaken in this time. Thank you.
Thanks, Joanne. Thanks for that report. Mark, I suppose a question I would have myself is, in the absence of a capital budget, what have we not been able to do over the last few months that you would normally have been expecting to do? What big jobs have actually been put on the back burner over the period?
There was, I think, earlier in the year, an expectation we would deliver surface dressing. That activity has been put on hold. What it has enabled us to do is review the capital programme in its entirety and produce a massive, shall I say it, dare I say it, list of works that we will be bringing at some time. The main issue for us was a lot of the quarries closed down, so the accessibility of hot tar just stopped. So in doing permanent patching of any size, whether it's a smaller pothole repair or a great big overlay, was something that we just could not deliver. The material wasn't available. It involves larger squads. Sometimes we hire in the special equipment, so that had an impact of what equipment we could get. We are lucky in that we benefit from the council having its own tar plant over in Skye at Sconser. They've got a quarry there, and so that was producing coal tar material, which has enabled us to do a lot of the patching. So it has involved trips over there, but that's within the council. So it has stopped a capital programme, and the works that would have been identified and approved by yourselves at committee at some point is what that's prevented us from doing at the moment.
Thanks for that. So going forward then, you've identified the things that need to be prioritised, I presume, for the months and probably years ahead. So is that going to be built into the capital programme going forward once we actually know what your capital budget is going to be?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, Joanna, thank you for that. I've got a number of hands up, so I've got Councillor Curry first. Councillor Curry? Kirstine, can you hear me?
Thanks, Chair. Thank you, Joanne.
We've lost you again, Kirstine. Can you try again, please?
Locations, defect repairs.
Oh.
On page 10. Sorry, can you not hear me?
No,
can hear you now.
You're intermittent.
Right, okay, I'll try again. So on page 10, road safety defect repairs. Can you clarify what that is? The community are quite concerned because the road signs are pretty manky round about there, the ones that have been there for a while. They need a good wash. And does this include installation of the new NC 500 road signs that there was quite a stishy about? Because I really can't see how we can justify that as being using stock materials, sort of defect repairs. Can you clarify that for me, please, Josie?
Yeah, the road safety defect repairs are, as is described in Appendix 1 under Item 5, it's Category 1 and Category 2H defects, which were essentially potholes. Emergency response potholes, massive ones, some ones that were starting to get bigger. So that was the defect repairs. The element that refers to signs is not NC 500. It was the replacement of poles on signs that are more warning signs, the triangle signs, passing place signs. The NC 500 contract is been let separately by HQ. It's leader funded, and it's been undertaken by an external contractor. Now, I do believe there were some issues between that contractor and his subcontractor about carrying out work in COVID. I believe the thought process had been that the roads are quiet, we'll just get on with it, not appreciating it wasn't an essential activity and there had been an instruction to stop it. I think there's been a fair amount of correspondence in the background regarding that matter, but it's not been our squads that were doing it, and it wasn't an activity that was identified in this as something that was essential.
Thank you so much for that clarity, Josie. Really appreciate that. That clears a lot of things up for us and for the public. Thanks, Josie.
Thank you. We've got Councillor McGilvery now, please.
Thank you, Chair. I think things in the main have been handled commendably well, and I've received no complaints whatsoever about roads issues over the period of the pandemic so far. I apologise to Josie because we've had a little bit of a discussion in Dornoch about spaces for people, and I copied you in, and I should not have. It lies with Colin Howell, and that has been settled one way and another. I notice also that the capital plan is under review, and can I possibly suggest another one at the end of your very, very long list? John McCarty is pushing ahead with proper 44 units plus at Bishopfield, and I have in front of me, digging into history, a plan here for the junction of Stafford Road and Grange Road, produced by a certain Colin J.T. Mackenzie of years past, and I think perhaps it'd be very useful to have this revisited at some point. It's a very difficult junction. And I know there are other priorities, but I feel obliged to have it brought up at this point just to bring it to your attention. So thank you for that.
Could I ask that we get together over that plan you have from Colin, as generally when planning things are being discussed, we liaise with our transport planning team who coordinate for us, but it's blurred. Maybe if you could copy an email to me, I can make sure it's included in any discussions.
Certainly, that's very kind of you.
Thanks for that, Josie. Councillor Morrison.
Thank you, Josie. Good report. Thanks for the update. I'd just like to thank you for the amount of work that's actually going on just now as well with the squads in the north and west. You've got them busy and they're on lots of different things. They're grass cutting, white lining, and the sweepers. The public notice things when they're happening, and that keeps that day for a while anyway. So, I was just wondering where the jet park chair is just now. I haven't seen that in about 3 or 4 years. I don't even know if we still have it, and I was just wondering where it is. It's something that came around the north when it was first introduced, and as I say, I haven't seen it probably in at least 3 years. So if we still have one, I was just wondering what area it's in. And also, I don't know if you've got, if you're speaking to John Mackay, I don't know, certainly from Lochinver to Melwick, we're struggling with one man in each area doing the grass and the cemeteries and the amenities and the burials. And I think they're putting squads in from different areas, but is there any way that if you've got spare men, you could liaise with them and help the boys on the ground? Because you've got Davy Thompson's doing probably 11 cemeteries, the amenities and the burials from Darness to Lochinver, and then you've got Stuart Finlay on the North Coast, and he's doing the same. And it is putting an awful lot of pressure on these guys, because if you want the public to be irate with anything to do with the council, it's having cemeteries that are unkempt. And they understand just now that it's difficult times, but I just wondered if they fall behind, is there any way that you could actually help out with putting men in place? And also, just to finish on the fact that the 3 that retired, I'd just like to put it on record that my thanks to the 3 of them. I knew them very well, and I wish them a healthy retirement. Thank you.
Thank you. I can comment, the jet patcher, it hasn't been in our area or Sutherland for a couple of years, partly because the operatives we had trained had left and we had struggled to get training. We have actually scheduled training for a couple of guys on the north, along with some of the guys in Caithness. We're sharing it. So the jet patcher is due back in the area. The training is scheduled for next month. It's been a bit of a challenge with the lockdown. So we do hope to have it back in the area. It is scheduled for sort of August, September time to come in. Amenities, I assume the members are aware that with the restructure, amenities now sit with communities in place and roads are with infrastructure and environment. So we've been sort of separated as a service. From my own point of view, we are very lean on the ground with operatives. You know, we have struggled. We've not got much resilience in that respect. But I am aware that at a higher level, there is a discussion because of the cross-service working to support each other. The amenities guys assist us in the winter with footpath gritting, and so it's a shame. I saw Karen McDermott in here earlier on, but she's gone now. It's a shame. She's eco for communities in place, and it would have been interesting to have her take on this. But I do know that there's discussions regarding the winter side of things, so I can feed in on the summer side of things. But generally what I would say is if we had a capital programme, we would be very limited in what sort of assistance we could provide to amenities. I hear what you're saying about having just 2 for the north. It is a challenge, and when they've got the backlog, you know, because of the restriction we've had, it is a challenge. But I'll feed into my head of service, who can feed into the discussions that are ongoing at the moment. And
thanks for that, Josie. I think it would be interesting for a future area committee to have Karen attend and give us an update on the that side of things as well. So that would be very, very useful. Okay, is there any other questions for Josie before we let her go? No. Okay. One thing for myself is regarding white lining. I know that there's a particular interest in getting the white lining done in the Goldspeak Fountain Road car park. Are we any closer to getting the white liner in this area at all?
The white liner is out and about. At the moment, we have to prioritise our safety elements, which are junctions. unfortunately, I don't have a separate budget for white lining car parks. So they are on my wish list. I have a rather extensive list on the board behind me of car parks I would like to do. But until I have a bit of clarity on what finances are, it's the junctions we're prioritising as safety elements at the moment. So yeah, I recognise, and I think it's been an acknowledgement across from everybody that with the lockdown, we've had a significant reduction of traffic on the road, which has allowed our guys to get out, not least on the NC 500, and do some repair works. But at the same time, we've not had the freedom to do all the activities we would dearly love to do in that time. So that there is a balance we've struggled with, and yeah, it's been a
I appreciate that, Josie. Listen, thank you very much indeed for the report and for your attendance today. It's greatly appreciated. As I said to other attendees, you're welcome to stay if you wish, but I'm sure you've probably got other things you would rather be doing. But so thank you once again.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, members, we're moving on to item 7 on the agenda, and that is the Dornoch Common Good Fund application requiring Sutherland County Committee approval, and we've got Phil's going to give us an update on where we are with that. Phil?
Yeah, I'm here. Sorry, I was just getting ready. Right, okay, thank you. Okay, so we've got 2 applications in excess of £10,000, so they need to be approved by Sutherland County Committee, and there are sufficient funds in Dornoch Common Good to cover the grants. The report provides information on the 2 applications, but I will give you a very brief summary. Dornoch Heritage Skio is applying for £27,365 for an extension project at the History Links Museum. The total cost of the project is £31,818, and all the match funding is in place. The project will increase the museum floor area by about 50%, which will provide additional exhibition space, meeting space, allow for the development of other museum services and additional retail space. The funding will be used for the detailed design and planning to bring the project to a shovel-ready state in preparation for the fundraising for the actual construction. And the estimated cost of that is about £250,000. Dornoch Community Council has discussed the project and fully supports. Members are recommended to approve the grant. The second one relates to Datchik, and I don't know whether you want me to pause just for a moment.
Jim, if you want to withdraw, just turn the camera off in the meantime.
Can I simply speak on 7 part 1, Chair, and then turn my camera off?
Well, yes, you can do. On you go. If we pause at the moment, you can speak on that particular one first of all, and then you can turn the camera off. That's fine.
Yeah, Phil has produced a very comprehensive report which says everything that needs to be said. History Links for a number of years have successfully operated when supported by central funds. That era is now going, and they really have to take a new business case forward. And I think I commend them for their energy in producing this, and I really think that I commend Phil's recommendation to the committee.
Thanks for that, Jim. Appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, Phil, if you want to go on to the next one.
Okay, thank you. Project Curlew is Dornoch Area Community Interest Company project. It's applying for £39,760 for Phase 1 coach and car parking project. The total cost of the project is £299,200. Match funding has been applied for, but not yet secured. The coach will create car and coach parking with 40 car park spaces and 6 coach spaces on the former Dornoch Slaughterhouse site. So for those of you that don't know the site exactly, it's just off the main square in Dornoch. This is part of a larger 5-phase project to bring the long derelict site into community ownership and use. When completed, it will include a community centre with curling rink, a multi-use games area and a golf driving range. Datchik has been awarded funding from Scottish Land Fund to purchase the site, but that purchase is subject to a contamination survey that's due to take place shortly. Datchick's business plan indicates that the car park charges will generate sufficient revenue to contribute to the cost of a part-time town officer. However, this does need to be seen in the wider context of car parking in Dornoch, which is currently free, although the council was reviewing that before the COVID emergency, and I'm sure we'll return to that. Dornoch Community Council has discussed the project and is in support, and members are recommended to approve the grant, but subject to the match funding having been secured. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that, Phil. If we discuss the Datchick proposal first of all, from my perspective, I think it's an ambitious project. They're taking back ownership of effectively a derelict waste piece of land, and have ambitious proposals to make it seriously improve that area and offer new facilities. So from my perspective, I think it's an excellent proposal, and it will benefit the Dornoch area en masse, and not just Dornoch, but the surrounding areas as well. So from my perspective, I'm certainly in support of that, but I'm happy to hear anybody else's thoughts on it. Any members want to make any comment? No? Okay.
No, I would lend my support to the local members.
Thank you for that, Linda. Appreciate it. Okay. Well, that being the case, we're recommended to agree that grant of £39,760 from the Common Good Fund to the Dornoch Area Community Interest Company for the project Curlew, and as there have been no objections, that has been agreed. Okay.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Right.
Okay, Jim, if you're still there, you want to come back and we'll start talking about the heritage one now.
Back
Okay.
in, Chair.
Thank you. Going further on what Jim said earlier on, the History Links Museum is, I haven't been around it myself. I think it's a really fantastic place. It offers a great facility to locals and to visitors, and keeps the history of Dornoch alive. And I think, and not just Dornoch, the surrounding area as well. So I think it's an excellent project, and I commend the endeavours of the voluntary group that runs it. They're very committed, and I think this extension would be a real boost to that, and allow them to display many more exhibits. And I think that would be a bigger draw for tourists to the local area. So again, personally, I'm in favour of it, but I'd also like to hear the thoughts of other members. Any comments at all from anybody? Councillor Mackay?
Yeah, happy to support, Chair, for the reasons you've mentioned.
Okay. Any other comments from any other members?
No, just happy to support as well, Chair.
Okay, the recommendation then is that we approve the Dornoch Heritage Scheme for the History Links Museum Extension Project Phase 2 for a total of £27,365, and as there's been no objections, that is approved. So thank you very much. Okay. Sorry. Now I think we are actually, that has brought us to the end of the committee meeting. So thank you very much, members. I think it's our first Teams area committee meeting. It's worked very well. I know Linda had a little bit of problem getting on, but generally speaking, we haven't had many problems, apart from poor Jim not being able to speak from Betty Hill. But I think overall it's been a good experience. So thank you very much for attendance and for your support today, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, Chair.
You too.
Bye.